Hi everyone, and welcome to week 2 of your dementia awareness course. So today we're going to be looking further at unit 1 of dementia awareness. So your learning outcomes for today are to outline the medical and social models of dementia and to explain why dementia should be viewed as a disability. So the medical model and the social model of dementia, there are two ways of looking at dementia as a disability. So for this part of the unit, you need to explore both the medical model and the social model of dementia. I think for most of you, this will be brand new, so please continue to listen and learn. So dementia has mostly been seen as a medical issue, or the person with dementia has been seen as a problem. The dementia is seen as the problem to that person. And this is what we call the medical model. This has been used for decades for people with physical disabilities. So the medical model says you're the problem because your legs don't work. So if somebody uses a wheelchair, the medical model views the person as the problem because it's their legs that aren't working. In the same way with dementia, they would view the brain is the problem because it's not working as efficiently any longer. So a bit of history on the medical model and the social model. So in the 1970s, people started to say, well, yeah, but what about those steps to the library? What about the fact that people treat me as a second-class citizen? These things are just as much of a problem as my legs not working. And this is what became known as the social model of disability. So what we're looking at here is the social model. So those steps that are going up to that library, they are preventing the person whose legs don't work from getting to the library. Not their legs not working is preventing them, but those steps themselves. Why isn't there a ramp? People started to get a voice around their disability and wanted better rights. The social model, what it does is it argues that people are often more disabled by their environments and the attitudes of people as they are by their medical conditions. So if we think about sort of crossing the road, a normal sort of able walking person would be able to step down a curb and walk across the road, whereas if somebody used a wheelchair, they would have to go along to the nearest dipped curb, the ramp in the road, to be able to access safely. In the 1970s and 80s, disabled people started to use the social model to challenge the way that they were seen by society. So we have a history of the attitudes of people belittling those with disabilities, therefore not enabling them to be able to function in society. Because people were challenging the way they were seen by society, this resulted in huge changes to the way that many people with disabilities saw themselves, and it also helped how they were seen by others, and because of that it helped the experiences that they had. So most people, for some reason, still see dementia as the individual's problem. So although we've moved forward in terms of accessibility for people with wheelchairs, people who have a problem with their legs, that's why I've used that example prior to this, most people still see dementia as an individual's problem, not a society issue. So they might say, well, you have dementia, so that's why you can't understand the bus timetable. Now, if we think about it from a social model aspect, other people might see that the environments are bad and the attitudes of others are bad, and that's the barrier to people with dementia living more independently in society. So those people who think of the social model might say, well, the bus timetable is quite badly written and designed, and it's hard for everybody to read. And that is myself included. You know, you practically have to be a mathematician to work out some of these bus timetables. They say a bus comes at 10 to 8, 10 past 8 and half past 8, and then every 7 minutes until 4 o'clock. And you're there on your fingers trying to count, right, well, when's 7 minutes time? Or when's 15 minutes time? And it's not the easiest thing to work out for anybody, let alone somebody who has a condition that is affecting their brain, such as dementia. So the medical model looks at the pathological problem that needs medical treatment, and it looks at dementia as a declining condition where somebody is losing their functional abilities and can have behavioural and psychiatric disturbances. So it's focusing very much on the negatives of what that person is becoming, not who they were. Whereas the social model, it looks at dementia and it acknowledges that there is a medical problem in the person's brain, but instead of focusing what they can't do, instead we're going to focus on the remaining skills and abilities of that person so that they're able to live a more independent life. And it also looks at the outside factors such as the environment, as we looked at there, the bus timetable. So just thinking about question 1 here, the medical model of dementia views dementia as a medical condition that needs to be managed by experts like doctors, and so the people with dementia will become dependent on the help of an expert. They view it as a pathological problem and compare those with dementia to somebody that is normal. They focus on what's changed biologically in the brain and how it can negatively affect that individual, whether that comes with confusion, anger, frustration. And they're looking at medical treatment for those with dementia, such as medicines and drug trials, and trying to create a solution rather than managing the condition. The medical model looks at the behaviours of dementia, not the context in which those behaviours are displayed. So there could be some certain triggers that can affect a person with dementia. For example, when I worked with people with dementia, I remember a lady and she was asked by one of the care workers, "Do you have children?" And she cried and cried and cried, and she was very upset. And it turned out that she wasn't able to have children. Her and her husband had never managed to conceive, so she was devastated. So in the medical model, the context of that wouldn't have been taken into account. Instead, it would have been seen as a case of she is crying because of dementia. So the medical model doesn't recognise the social factors that dementia can have. Instead, it's looking at dementia is seen to be caused by something the individual has done. So there's almost like a blame context for having dementia. So some examples here could be smoking, obesity or being overweight that causes cardiovascular problems, which could lead to dementia. But there doesn't need to be a blame culture. The medical model encourages these types of attitudes, so it's encouraging the fact that you're the problem. It's about what you can't do. The most important thing is a cure for dementia. People with dementia cannot make decisions. They are victims and sufferers, and they need our sympathy. People with dementia are passive dependent. So for question 1, I would like you to outline the medical model of dementia. To outline at level 2, please ensure that you're writing in full sentences to develop a large paragraph. So you need to show that you understand what the medical model is and then relate it to dementia and how dementia could be viewed under this model. Please pause this video here to answer this question. The social model of dementia. So we've looked at the social model a little bit already, and now we're going to have a look at it in a bit more detail. So the social model recognises that the biological and social factors of dementia are present. So we're not just looking at the fact that it is a biological condition, and we're not just looking at the fact that the bus timetable is hard to read. Instead, we're looking at both of these. So the social model doesn't dismiss that dementia is a biological condition, but it doesn't focus on it, and instead it concentrates on a person's remaining abilities and skills and things that they can do, not what they can't do. It encourages activities to engage the mind of the person. So this could be things that they previously enjoyed, like perhaps they played chess. The social model looks at the importance of social relationships and community support. So rather than going in and giving a person a pill and hoping that it cures them of dementia, instead we're going to try and socialise them and give them lots of support within their community. Perhaps that means, taking them out shopping, letting them have the ability to plan their own meals, for example. The social model looks at the individual as a person, so we're not focusing on the dementia, we're looking at the person. The social model recognises that behaviours might be part of their identity, part of the dementia, or the behaviour might be caused by something other than dementia, like in the environment. So think back to the medical model where I told you about the lady who said that she wasn't able to have children. This was part of her identity because she wasn't able to have children, but also caused by the fact that she was asked a question about it, so the behaviour was reflected on that. And the social model recognises that, whereas the medical model doesn't. The social model of dementia promotes empowerment for the individual, so it gives them a voice, regardless of the cause of the condition. So we're not going to blame here. Of course, a cure for dementia would be great. So the social model tries to look at positive attitudes here. So a cure would be great, but in the meantime, there are lots of barriers to people with dementia. So these include attitudes of others, so people having negative opinions, and the physical environment. So maybe it's very tricky to navigate. Maybe they've changed the layout of the supermarket, for example. But instead of focusing on what they can't do, let's look at what people can do. People with dementia should be at the centre of the process of making decisions wherever possible and should be supported to participate fully. So this doesn't mean that they can make every decision, but they should be looked at as a person and what they can do rather than looking at what they can't do in the medical side of things. People with dementia have rights, deserve respect, and are much more than just the condition of dementia. And of course, people with dementia can be active citizens as well. So we're not looking at trying to institutionalise somebody by getting them to stay in a hospital where they could hopefully be cured through lots of different drug trials. Instead, we're going to let them play out whatever years they've got left and focus on what they can still do for themselves. So I would like you to now answer question 2, outline the social model of dementia. Please pause this video here whilst you complete that question. So is dementia a disability? This is not a straightforward yes or no. So should we view dementia as a disability? So I'd like you to think about what we looked at in the medical model and social model. Is dementia a medical problem? Does it require a solution? Is it an environmental problem caused by society? Are we making people with dementia more disabled because the world isn't accessible to somebody who cannot adapt to their changing environment? So let's have a look first of all at what the word disability means. So disability from the government website is defined as this: a mental health condition is considered a disability if it has a long-term effect on your normal day-to-day activity. This is defined under the Equality Act of 2010. Your condition is long-term if it lasts or is likely to last for 12 months. Normal day-to-day activity is defined as something you do regularly in a normal day. This includes things like using a computer, working to set times, or interacting with people. So think about those definitions in terms of a person with dementia. So is it a long-term effect on your normal day-to-day activity? So long-term is if it lasts or is likely to last for 12 months. So I think there we get a tick because the condition cannot be cured. It is going to stay for more than 12 months. Normal day-to-day activity, so things like using a computer, working to set times or interacting with people. So somebody with dementia in the early stages may well be able to use a computer. Again, they might be able to work to set times if they have a timer to work with, and they may still be able to interact with people. So under this definition of disability, a person with the early stages of dementia couldn't be classed as disabled. So let's look at the Equality Act of 2010. This is the law that protects disabled people from unfair discrimination in the UK. It defines disability as a physical or mental impairment that has a substantial and long-term negative effect on a person's ability to do normal day-to-day activities. So many people with dementia could be classed as disabled under this law because they will have a long-term, substantial negative effect on their ability to have normal daily activities, such as remembering to get a wash and get dressed every morning, such as putting the wash load on, having breakfast, having lunch and dinner at sensible times, sticking to times and routines, being able to get the bus. However, in some people in those early stages of dementia, they couldn't be classed as disabled under this definition because they will still have the ability to carry out normal daily activities. So another definition from the mentalhealth.org.uk website says when the law talks about disability, it is referring to the various impairments caused by illnesses and conditions. It talks about how people should be protected from unfair treatment because of their impairments. So again, many people with dementia would be classed as disabled under this law, but some wouldn't. So why should dementia be viewed as a disability if it doesn't necessarily mean that they are disabled under the current definitions of what disability means? So if a person with dementia is classed as disabled, it'll give the person dignity. They'll be able to access their rights relating to a medical condition, such as the Mental Capacity Act, advocacy, and safeguarding. So let's have a look at these in more detail. So let's start with dignity. So the person with dementia is an individual with feelings, so you need to treat them with respect and dignity. So remember, the person that you're caring for still has feelings, and dementia can affect people in different ways. For example, at the very start of dementia, in those early stages, the person may be very aware that they're struggling with tasks that they once found easy. Perhaps they've always done the crossword in the paper that they get every day. So what you and others say and do can be very disturbing. So it's important that you give the person dignity and avoid discussing that person's condition in his or her presence if it's going to particularly upset them. So let's think about the Mental Capacity Act, the human rights. So it's important to have a basic understanding of the Mental Capacity Act. We don't need to understand the full thing here, but the law can affect what we do as healthcare workers to support people with dementia. So no one would expect you to know every sentence and clause of the Act that relates to your country, but a basic understanding will help you to provide care that is in the person's best interests and, most importantly, is law-abiding. So let's have a look what the Mental Capacity Act says. It says people with dementia often become unable to make decisions for themselves as their condition progresses. When this happens, the person is said to lack capacity. The Mental Capacity Act covers important decision-making relating to an individual's property, financial affairs, their health, and their social care. This applies to everyday decisions like personal care, what to wear, and what to eat, and this can help people with dementia, their carers, and professionals to make decisions both now and in the future. So the word advocacy, what does this mean? Advocacy helps people to speak up about things that are important to them. So sometimes people may need support expressing what they want to say and having their point of view taken seriously, and advocates are there to be on someone's side. They can also help a person to access information, to think about different options, perhaps get a second opinion. And they also help the person with dementia to understand their rights, so they can make the decisions that they want about their life and they are fully informed. So what does the advocate do? The advocate will spend time with the person and get to know them so that they can support them individually and put forward their views and preferences. They don't give advice or make decisions for anybody, but they might support people by being there at meetings, helping a person make contact with the right people, and speaking for people in situations where they might not feel that they're able to speak for themselves. Safeguarding. So common symptoms of dementia include memory loss, disorientation, confusion, difficulty communicating, behavioural changes, low mood, and overall cognitive impairment, all of which can put a person at risk of abuse or neglect. When we think about neglect, the concerns of this are common because dementia can affect a person's ability to speak out or can make them very confused about what is going on around them. People with dementia are also vulnerable to financial abuse because they might stop understanding their bills or their finances, and they might trust somebody that they shouldn't be trusting to manage that. They can also be vulnerable to psychological abuse, such as name calling. Carers can sometimes reach breaking point and can express their anger to the service user. They might do this by shouting or being particularly unkind. And the service user might not understand this reaction and where it's come from if they cannot put into context what happened 5 minutes ago to cause these behaviours. And that would be very scary, to have somebody shouting or being unkind and not knowing why. People with dementia can be targeted by abusers because they're often not able to say no, and they can be very overwhelmed by somebody with authority. So somebody wearing a uniform with a badge could be very overwhelming for them to not trust, because they need to trust people. Dementia can stop people's communication skills, which can prevent people from being able to ask for help. If they're not able to structure a sentence or say words any longer, then they're not going to be able to ask for help. Because people with dementia may feel particularly lonely, they might accept the abusive behaviours because it's better than spending time alone. Another way to think about it is that the person may forget that the abuse has never happened, so never be able to report it. So let's have a look at dementia as a disability through some safeguarding case studies. You work as a sheltered housing warden. Mr. and Mrs. Green have been together for over 50 years and live in a sheltered housing flat. Mrs. Green has dementia. She's confused and can no longer undertake any of the domestic tasks. Mr. Green is becoming more and more impatient with her. He shouts at her and he calls her stupid on a regular basis. He controls all the money and tells her what she can and can't do. Mrs. Green presents as unkempt and has started to smell. When Mr. Green shouts at her, she cowers and shakes. So does this raise safeguarding concerns, and if so, what type of abuse might be occurring? Mrs. Fante is a 90-year-old woman with dementia who came to the UK from Ghana in the 1960s. Her daughter has recently died and her other family live a considerable distance away. She needs a lot of care but wants to continue to live on her own with home care support. You work for the new care agency which has taken over her care, but each time you visit, Mrs. Fante has become increasingly distressed. Today she complains that you and the other carers are often late and she has to sit for hours hungry. Sometimes she is soiled and has wet incontinence pads. She also says that they shout at her. Does this raise safeguarding concerns, and if so, what type of abuse could be occurring? Mr. Jones is an elderly man with dementia who lives alone in a rented home. He lost his wife 2 years ago. You work as a home care assistant and it is your first time visiting Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones answers the door but can barely open it. The hallway is blocked with rubbish and old newspapers. When you make a comment that you are concerned about the amount of rubbish piling up, he replies defensively that it's none of your business and get out of my house. Does this raise any safeguarding concerns, and if so, what type of abuse could be occurring? So let's think about dementia as a disability in terms of safeguarding. Those case studies highlight the importance of dementia being classed as a disability because they highlight the vulnerabilities of a person with dementia. All three of those people within the scenarios would need your concerns reporting to the safeguarding team so a proper assessment could be done, because there's risks of financial abuse, emotional abuse, verbal or physical abuse. There's also a lack of a safe environment caused by self-neglect, and these all need passing on to the relevant person in your organisation. Please answer the next question. So explain why dementia should be viewed as a disability. Remember when you're explaining at level 2 that you need to ensure you're using full sentences and developing paragraphs. You need to structure your answer into 3 paragraphs with about 3 to 4 sentences in each. To explain, you need to use conjunctions or joining words such as because, therefore, however, but and is. So just a bit of a tip here, this question has a few different elements. So firstly, I would say work through the lesson looking at the definitions of what a disability is, and for each definition relate to whether you think dementia is a disability or not. So you should now have achieved your aims and objectives of outlining the medical and social models of dementia, and you should have now explained why dementia should be viewed as a disability.